Okay, so we are now going to resume. We have
My
corrected
name
our...
is Patricia Palafox.
Wait a minute, hold on. We've corrected our technical difficulties. We had to take a break there because of technical difficulties. We weren't streaming. So we'll pick it up again with Hearing Officer Patricia Palafox and her recommendations on the case of Brian Dominguez. Thank you.
And I think I finished my summary of my recommendation. And when you get to the new evidence, maybe I can speak to that too. If there's a question whether the new evidence was considered or not, I might be able to speak to that, but I would rather do it after the presentation by Mr. Dominguez and the city attorney.
Okay.
I don't know if it's
We
relevant.
do have a question over here.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It may be directed to you or to the attorneys. The issue of documentation, to me, caused me to think about the photographs that had been taken by Mr. Dominguez, but not uploaded within a 24-hour period. I think that's the procedure.
Well, they're supposed to, oh, go ahead. Yes.
The issue of documentation, the photographs are part of that issue?
That was an additional. The documentation was one thing, the photograph uploading was another. Because what he did not do is the inventory, and if every dog needed to be listed, identified, they don't have a name, but do they have a registration, do they have a vaccination? And so the next day, they did 40, that's how they knew there were 40 dogs.
So
That's a documentation.
So the fact that he took the photographs has no impact on anything other than just simply, I guess my question is, if taking the photographs indicates an acknowledgement of a procedure necessary to document what was happening, so his photographs, does that acknowledge his acceptance of the process of needing to document?
I don't think so necessarily, because doing the documentation, once there's a bite, then you have to do this documentation that's very specific. And I think the photographs are just kind of your normal procedure. So he did do that, but he didn't take the inventory showed him there were 40 dogs there and what the status was of the dogs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
A question. So this took place at about what time was it?
Like 8:30?
8:30 at night, and he's got an inventory of 40 dogs?
Right, but they said, again, the supervisor said he could have called for help. He could have said, he closed the case, so then the case was gone as far as animal services was concerned until there was that posting on streaming. So if they had not had that posting, it might have just gone on because the case was closed. So there were supervisors saying he could have one of them did say, send an email the next day, try to get people out there, do something. If it couldn't do it right then it could be done later. But he closed the case, which meant that was it, until the director saw this post.
Did his supervisor tell him he could close the case?
The lead person, there's a supervisor, and then who he called was the lower of the chain. The chain of command is him, the senior, the supervisor. And so they can go, if the senior isn't there, they can go to the supervisor. That's a dispute, because he says, the supervisor, the senior says, I never told them to close the case. Mr. Dominguez said, yes, he said it was okay to close the case. So that was a dispute in the evidence. But then other people, the co-workers that he brought to the hearing said, we would not have left the property. We would have done something because it was a bite, and you need to, when there's a bite involved, it's a different documentation. Then it's not just do they have food, water, and shelter.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Palafox? Okay, so from here, I guess we can move on to find out about the new evidence. All right, thank you. And so, Brian Dominguez, if you could please tell us about the new evidence that you have.
Hi, good afternoon.
And Chair, if I may, perhaps, for the purposes of Mr. Dominguez speaking to you all right now, not necessarily describe the new evidence, but, explain to you all why he thinks it should be considered, and it wasn't available at the time of the hearing, which is the burden.
Okay, so we don't want you to go into detail, just tell us why it was not available at the time of the hearing.
Correct. Well, good afternoon. My name is Brian Dominguez. The information that I submitted was of other previous calls that was available. However, based on this being my first time and me being or not being a lawyer on this situation, did not let me know that I could bring this into to be considered. That's why I submitted this information later, so it could get a sense of how things have been done prior and after my inspection, because there was other calls and other complaints afterwards.
Any questions?
You said that this information was available?
Yes, sir.
You just-
However, I didn't know that it could be brought into the scenario.
And, you know, I've heard this before in other cases unrelated
Right.
to you, where the employee comes forth and they didn't have legal representation, they didn't have an attorney counseling them and guiding them on what they should do. And I've always said that that's a shame, that, the employee has to come before us by themselves, figuring out the system,
Right.
and now you're coming again. So this, to me, is not the first time I've heard an employee tell us this, okay? So from this point, to consider his evidence,
Yes, sir.
we have to decide whether,
It's new evidence that was unavailable at the time of the hearing. And I think if Mr. Dominguez, doesn't have anything else to provide to the commission in support of why it should be considered, the attorney for the city, Mr. Matt Marcus, should, come up here and explain why he thinks it should not be admitted. Because the city filed a response to Mr. Dominguez's brief. And then after that, you can hear from Hearing Officer Palafox on the issue of the new evidence. Now, with all that being said, there is a comment on the record saying that the information was available, so you all need to consider that. But, Chair, you want to open it up now to the other?
I do
Well,
have one question
Go
for
ahead.
Mr. Dominguez.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dominguez, so when did you find out that you could, and who did you find out from that you could submit this additional evidence? How did you
Once-
find that out?
Once I read through the brief that the hearing officer provided, and once I read through the civil service email where it showed that I could do an appeal to the recommendation, I just wanted to complement my case with the additional paperwork so that context could be given to the situation.
And when did he submit the additional, how far after?
I don't have that information. Simone probably would, or one of the parties.
When did he submit the additional information?
Mr. Marcus, do you know?
I think I do. It's October 28th, and the city responded on October 30th.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
okay, so, go ahead.
Okay, no, that's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
let me clarify that then. So the recommendation came out on what date?
What date did you get it? October 27th is when I signed.
Okay, you signed on the 27th, and your additional evidence came in on 28th, the day after.
Shortly thereafter.
Shortly after, and that's because, as you said, you read the recommendation, then you realized you could submit new evidence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Dominguez, and for your service. You've been with the department now 9 years?
13 years, sir.
30 years?
13 years.
13?
Yes, sir.
13, pardon me?
Yes.
13?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as an animal control officer.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll hear from the city attorney, right?
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. Nice to see you. My name is Matt Marquez. I'm an assistant city attorney, and I was the attorney who handled the hearing with Judge Palafox and Mr. Dominguez. I do want to just point out some aspects of this. I know the chair, you mentioned about situations where an employee who's appealing a discipline appeal doesn't have a lawyer and then maybe has issues with not knowing what they can provide in terms of evidence. I would like to, if I may, just put a little context to that. This hearing with Mr. Dominguez was really well prepared on his behalf. I think Officer Palafox will agree with that. We had a full hearing over the course of an entire day, and we went into the next day. We had 11 witnesses that we heard from, 6 of whom were chosen by Mr. Dominguez. Mr. Dominguez provided the binder right here that I have in front of me on this table here, over 185 pages worth of exhibits. He did a lot of work to prepare for his case and to submit related type of documents to the new ones that he's now trying to add. He had an opportunity to do that because he did. He submitted a lot of documents for his case. He even engaged in discovery. So in case you all aren't aware, there's a discovery process that the employees can ask us for discovery requests to provide answers to questions, to provide additional documents that they may not have. Mr. Dominguez did that, so he availed himself of that process. He sent us some discovery requests. We provided him with more documents, some of which he used and he chose to include in his exhibits. All that to say, though, is that we believe, from the city's perspective, that he had the full and fair, free opportunity to present his whole case, his arguments, his evidence, his witnesses, the homeowner, the pet owner, some of his colleagues. They all gave testimony. The hearing officer had an opportunity to ask questions of those witnesses and really get the full context of the scenario and the situation. And she found, frankly, that the evidence just didn't persuade her, and the city, by contrast, did meet its burden with our expert or with our witnesses from the department. And so with that, I would say that you heard from Mr. Dominguez that this new evidence was available. It's things like photographs that he had access to, he could have provided because he provided other ones. So we would ask that you all not consider the brief on the new evidence because it was already issues that were addressed by the hearing officer. 14 pages, careful analysis of this case. So we believe that everything's right there in the recommendation, and we would ask that you make a determination on that recommendation as it stands now. So I'll leave it with that, but happy to take any questions if you all have any.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I just,
Yes, sir.
again, want to emphasize that even though he did a lot of work there, I mean,
did.
you've got a animal control officer doing legal work, which you and the hearing officer took years to prepare for in terms of your education, law school, et cetera, and now you're asking a animal services control officer to present evidence and represent himself. And this is an issue I have taken up many times with employees who've had to do this. And I think it's unfair that an employee of the city would have to prepare themselves against legal minds who have gone to school for all this. And that's my point, okay? So be it as it may, I think that's impressive that an animal control officer pulled together all that evidence and cooperated with you and the hearing officer in this matter.
Sir.
Okay, so from this point,
Will you
Okay.
recognize me for a motion?
absolutely.
This is Commissioner Lucero. I make the motion to support the city attorney's recommendation not to consider the new evidence.
There's a motion on the floor, a
Is there a
second.
second?
I second.
Woody Bear seconded. Okay, we're open for discussion.
Can we revisit the policy that you started off with?
Yes, yes, Commissioner.
I don't see it in our packet. Do we have it?
This policy was provided in the onboarding binder
it.
you were
Okay.
provided. And
Yeah, can we just,
Sure. It's on the screen now,
Okay.
Commissioner.
go down to the bullet points that you,
The first page, under procedures and bullet points. You want to see the language that I cited to?
there we go, yeah. So timely, the word timely is
Which one are you looking at?
the third one. Failure of a party to timely submit a written brief will result in the commission not considering the brief and making its determination. So what is timely? It was a day after, right?
Right, so, and just to clarify the issues, I think for purposes of tonight's hearing, whether it was timely or not is not an issue, because his brief with the new evidence was the day after, so it was timely. The question is more under bullet point number 3, which is, the evidence, the new evidence in the brief must not have been available, was unknown at the time of the hearing.
Even the employee said he knew it and he used it to appeal, not as new unknown evidence.
Can we turn on your mic, please? And these were rules, just so you all know, that were adopted by, this commission, previous members, but by the commission.
And Commissioner, if I just may, because you had a question on timely, and it may come up in other settings. Generally, in timely in these types of situations is if it meets the deadline. And if you look at bullet point 1, it's no later than the 10th day. So anything past that, and I think even if you scroll down 1, it says brief submitted the day of the commission won't be exact. So when we mean timely, it's the deadline.
Okay. Got it. We can move forward.
Okay, before we move forward, would it be all right to ask Mr. Dominguez to tell us what he wanted to submit that wasn't,
No, Chair. That's what the vote's on.
whether or not to let him
Yeah,
do that? Yeah.
That's the motion.
But I was gonna say, there's a motion on the floor right now. There's questions. I have a question. So the decision we're trying to make right now is with the city, that because he didn't provide enough information or he failed for the report, right?
So the issue you're considering right now is whether or not to allow him to present the additional evidence. Just that. He submitted a brief to you all after the hearing with new evidence, and the issue that you're voting on is whether or not to allow him. And the motion on the floor is to not allow him, to say that you cannot submit the information. That's the motion on the floor. And then, once you vote on that issue, we'll move on to the issue of the hearing officer's recommendation.
Okay.
I just want to speak against the motion because I think by allowing him to present what he considers to be additional information that he did not get a chance to present, with as much work as he's gone through on all this, he ought to get a fair shake and the benefit of the doubt, and make sure that when we do decide whether or not to sustain a 3-day suspension, that he had his say, okay? Especially since he's working by himself without an attorney.
So in conversation with my motion, reading through all the documentation is very interesting. Context is interesting because it provides the ability to be able to consider other things other than just simply the facts as they were presented to us. One of the things I found compelling is that he brought, I think it was 12 additional animal protection employees?
No, sir, he was initially gonna try to bring 9.
9.
And the hearing officer, said in terms of, just timeliness,
Repetitive.
3 of them, pick your top 3.
Right.
Because we think they're essentially gonna be duplicate,
Sure.
repetitive
So to me,
testimony.
that tells me he had a pretty good understanding of what was going on. because this is just not one example, but I, reading it, thought, this guy's doing a pretty good he's doing a pretty good job presenting his case, and almost over-presenting his case, which is a tactic in and of itself, which is terrific. Got no issue with that whatsoever. But the further I read along, the other context, and this is just me speculating, is that all the information that I read is all included in this. And so for me, new evidence is redundant, because it's already included in the presenting packet, or all the information that was presented for the case. That's my personal opinion. That's why I'm suggesting that. The other thing, too, is there seems to be a discrepancy, and I don't know whether this is going to play a role in this or not, that given the unique situation that there were so many dogs, that the question was, what do we do? And so when presented with the idea that let's just close this out without doing any work, that was a viable, in his mind, and again, I'm putting myself in his place. I'm not suggesting he did anything that another person would do, but he decided that's the advice that he was going to take, and so he did it. The question I asked about the photographs leads me to believe that he was aware enough that he needed to do something as related to documentation, acknowledging the fact that something needed to be done, in this case, the procedures. So there seems to be a thoroughness in what he presented, but a contradiction in the context that he's trying to provide us. So the redundancy of the new evidence, that's my articulation of the motion. There is no new evidence.
And I also take issue with Mr. Dominguez. He said that there was a conflict on whether or not he was told to close the case, but we can't get into that, right?
I would say, Chair, I would recommend that if there's no further discussion on the new evidence issue, that a vote be taken so that you all can move on to the next part of the hearing.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
I have a motion made by Commissioner Lucero, seconded by Commissioner Woodrow-Bear to not uphold the new evidence. We could take a vote.
okay, any other questions before we take the vote? Any other questions or comments on this before we take a vote? Okay, with none, then let's take the vote.
Okay, raise your hand for A's. Who agrees to not uphold the new evidence? Okay, 4. Any nays? And I believe you don't have a vote,
Right,
Chairman.
but yes.
You don't have a vote. So it
Thanks for
passes
playing- thanks
unanimously
for
to
playing
not
along.
uphold the new evidence.
For the sake of letting you know that I'm listening.
Thank you.
So now you all are now free to discuss the hearing officer's recommendation and whether or not you're going to uphold it, or modify it, or reject it. Okay? And you are free to call whomever you want to call, or discuss it amongst yourselves. You've heard from a lot of them already.
I have an issue with the employees not actually seeing the policies and just being told. And if all of the employees are saying that, then there are questions as to actually how the procedures come about. You know, how do we know they're really doing things the right way or the wrong way? Because they don't know, you know, they haven't seen, they haven't agreed to it. And that leaves a question in my mind. How is it that the department doesn't have the employees read whatever the rules and regulations are and not have them sign in some way that they review those?
May I answer that question?
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering, if you should answer it, or HR should answer it, or who's?
I can if I
Go
may.
ahead. Okay.
And what I would do is, I would actually point to the hearing officer's recommendation herself. On that aspect about access to the policy, that was one of his arguments, is he didn't have access to the policy, so he didn't know the standard operating procedures, like written, right? And he brought 2 witnesses to testify to that same thing, more inexperienced colleagues of his. The hearing officer in the recommendation said, yeah, I'm not faulting you for that. There's an issue there, and so I'm not basing my recommendation on that. Rather, it was his own acknowledgement and confirming that he knew what the process was in this type of situation. This type of situation, 40 dogs, 20 dogs, a lot of dogs. There was testimony, though, that That is actually not as uncommon as you might think. There are a lot of folks out there that do have a large number of pets. And in this case, it was pretty simple that he knew, and he confirmed this, and his colleagues, said the same thing, is they knew that in this situation, they had to check that VMR status, the vaccination, microchip registration, had to check that. They had to do the animal profiles or the inventories of all the dogs. And yes, that was some tedious work in the context of 20-plus dogs. But that's the thing, is he was only at this house for 25 minutes on this call. He had time over the rest of his shift before it ended at 11 o'clock, or he had options to get his colleagues to come help him, reach out to another supervisor, as Ms. Palafox mentioned. He spoke to a senior APO, Animal Protection Officer. He never reached out to a supervisor, which he could have. He's been doing this job for a long time. He knew he could have reached out to get some additional help. He also could have just not closed out the case that night. Leave it open so there could be follow-up the next day so that they had more folks to go in there and do a process where they could document all those dogs. So it was clear that what needed to be done, it was just a matter of he chose not to. He could have done a situation where the homeowner would bring one dog at a time. And again, if he had requested and received backup from his colleagues, they could have done that in a more efficient way. So anyway, it was less so about the written policies, which again, the hearing officer, she acknowledges in the recommendation. But it was, you knew what to do anyway. And in fact, your colleagues who had been only in the position 1 and 2 years, one of them had only been there for a year and a half, the other one 2 years, way less experienced, they knew exactly what to do in that call. And he'd been there for over 9 years, 13 years. Yeah, that's where we landed on there, and that's what I think Ms. Palafox saw and went our way on that recommendation. So, long way of answering your question, but I hope that helped. Yes, sir.
Can we bring Mr. Dominguez back up?
That's just what I was going to ask. May we?
Yes. Of course.
Thank you very, very much. Mr. Marcus, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Dominguez, if you could please step forward.
Mr. Dominguez, Wyatt, can you tell us a little bit about, well, one, did you just close it without taking any action? We kind of want to hear from your words, and if so, why did you do that? Did you ask for help? Did you get any guidance from your supervisor, whoever that was that you spoke to?
Yes, I did. So Mr. Marquez said that 6 of the witnesses were requested by me. 2 of them, part of them were PD, and the other one was the pet owner itself, so they could tell their part, and it's an unbiased opinion. I took that decision based on what was told to me through my senior. We gotta watch our boundaries. We're not peace officers, so at the time of the inspection, the pet owner was stressed about us being there and about the situation that the dog was dead on his backyard. The police department took some pictures, and my pictures show less dogs in their backyard. When I asked the pet owner on if we could access, he said, no, we cannot step in. We work with people to try to get as much information. My senior was made aware of this situation and said, well, what if the dog is dead, then there's nothing else we can do if we don't have a visual on the other dogs, especially the dogs that were hurt on the inside. And we cannot do anything more about it, and we can go ahead and close the call because the dog is already dead. We cannot give a vet assessment, so it can be checked by a veterinarian. We can just document that there was a situation where one of the dogs was dead. The owner didn't even know what other dog had killed him.
Okay, go ahead. Mr. Lucero.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your service to the city. It's obviously you've been pretty good at what you're doing. So my questions to you have nothing to do with that. It has simply trying to figure out whether the city did the right thing by recommending sustaining the 3-day suspension. My question has to do with you taking photographs.
Correct.
So to me, plain in terms of common sense, indicates to me that there was a procedure that was in place that you began to follow.
Yes.
So in following that, I believe you're acknowledging that that procedure was something that you needed to, what, follow?
Followed through, and that's why I called my senior officer.
But you began the process of documentation by taking those photographs.
Yes.
Do you think that's an acknowledgement of the fact that you might have done something that you should have completed that you didn't complete?
Yes, however, my
I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm just, do you
Yeah.
believe taking pictures is an acknowledgement of the documentation that was necessary for this particular event?
yes,
And was this the first time you'd ever responded to this kind of event?
no,
So you had done this before, and documentation in terms of photographs was something that you did on those previous occasions?
right, and we do as much as we can from within our legal reach.
Sure, I understand. And despite not knowing, and I acknowledge the fact that the case officer, Patricia, had that and acknowledged that, despite the fact that you'd never seen the policy, you still did the procedure several times before, but just not in this particular case.
Correct.
I'm not trying to confuse you. All I'm trying to say is, even though you didn't know of the policy, you had previously responded to events like this and had documented everything in terms of, I don't want to use that, the microchip, the vaccination, there's a 3-letter,
Right, the VMR.
but you did that
acronym.
before, just not in this particular case.
It's been done before.
Did you do it before?
On this case, and
No,
this
no.
matters?
Previously, when you responded to cases like this, did you do that before?
Whatever dogs are involved, yes, we.
Okay,
doc-
so you're acknowledging that you know the process, you know the photographs, the
Right.
documentation, all that, the procedure, you know that, despite not seeing it, and those 3 other employees, or the 9 that were available, the only 3 that confirmed that they had not seen it either.
Correct.
So ignorance of the policy doesn't mean that you didn't actually use the policy or do the documentation.
Well, the policy leads into how we do our investigation.
Sure, another way to say that is on-the-job training.
Right,
You observe and you do it because everybody else is doing it, even though you don't know what the policy is. This seems to be the procedure within the department. That's a separate issue. I just want to make sure that you understand. My
Correct.
questioning has to do with you doing what you were supposed to do in previous occasions. But again, this has nothing to do with your credibility, and I thank you for your service. It's obviously you know what you're doing, but in this particular case, there seems to be a question.
right, and it was about the documentation of the biting dog that killed that one dog. I couldn't get to that dog.
No, I understand. And I understand that you're providing context for my question.
Right,
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm concerned about what you said a little while ago. You closed it out because your supervisor told you, close it. Is that right?
Correct.
Did I understand that correctly?
yes, sir.
Your
Well, the senior officer.
senior officer, that's not a supervisor?
No, not,
Well, I guess we have to redefine what the senior officer position, I don't know if Ms. Palafox wants to.
Well, before we do
Explain.
that, so anyway, you were acting on your senior officer telling you, close it out.
Correct,
You did that.
correct.
Do you feel that was the right call from the senior officer?
Based on the information that I gave him, I thought that was the correct path to follow.
So you felt you didn't need to document or any
Well,
follow-up or to call anyone?
I felt it was necessary, but given the situation that we could not have access to inside the house, to have a visual on the dogs, to find out which was the biting dog, that's why I called him, and that's why I followed his advice and procedure. I don't have to agree with it or like it, I just have to follow his command.
And there's a dispute.
Yes.
Yeah. That happened.
That's what concerns me, the dispute as to whether or not, he was cleared in closing the case. And you felt apparently, that's what I take it, you felt that you did the right thing by closing it out after talking to your senior officer, is that right?
Correct. Had he said anything different, that's what I would have had to do.
But there's a dispute on those saying that he got that permission.
Right.
Did
So
you-
we'll have to bring up Ms. Patricia Palafox back up, because she said, there's a he said going on.
Exactly.
And he's not here, correct? The senior level officer is not here.
Did you ask for any advice from the officers, or did they make any recommendations?
I asked the police department if they were gonna do a cruelty case based on the condition that there were other dogs that we couldn't see inside the property. They said no, and they testified whenever we had our hearing. They also did a report, and their pictures show different amount of dogs than the ones I have. Why? Because the dogs were going in and out of the property. Whenever I got there, it was a different amount of animals.
Have you ever had a situation where you didn't agree with what a senior officer told you? And did you take any additional steps? Did you contact a supervisor?
No, that's not for me to, we follow a chain of command. So I cannot take it upon myself to take anything or do something different than what we're asked.
You're not allowed to go beyond the senior officer?
No.
Chair, what I would recommend we do, because we're not here to hear the case all over again, right? We're here to determine whether or not you all agree with the hearing officer's recommendation. But I do think that everyone on the commission should have an opportunity to ask at least one question to Mr. Dominguez. Mr. Marquez has already spoken for the city in his capacity as the lawyer who was at the hearing. Once you're done with or asking questions from Mr. Dominguez, you can do, I know there's someone here from the department. I don't know if you want to hear from them, and then hearing Officer Palafox, but then close the questioning and then just discuss the issue amongst yourselves so that you all can narrow down on the specific issue, which is what are you going to do with your hearing officer's recommendation. And then just a tip, and I should have jumped in a little bit sooner, but I just wanted you all to, it's been a while since we've had a meeting. When you have any of the folks up at the podium, Mr. Dominguez, Mr. Marquez, the department and or the hearing officer, that is a time to ask them questions. Ask the question that you think you need, and then once you're done with the question and answer session, you can then make the points of what your thoughts are to each other. But I think if we're doing that while we're asking questions, we'll be here all night. So.
All right, and you brought up a very good point that I wanted to get into, and that is someone else that's in the audience who is with the department that we could hear from?
I believe there is someone here from the department. I see Gina Ramirez. Is that correct?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dominguez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening. Gina Ramirez for the record. I am with the Department of Animal Services alongside with our director and one of my field supervisors.
So really, who would you all like to hear from? You're not going to call all three of them. Do you want to hear from Ms. Ramirez, the director, or assistant director?
Okay, let's go with the director, right? Okay, let's hear from the director. Thank you very much.
Thank you for introducing yourself.
All right.
Hello, my name is Michael Waxman. For the record, interim director for the City of El Paso Animal Services.
Well, what could you add to the case here at this moment?
So, yeah, listening to some of the questions y'all are asking, his presentation. I want to clarify again, he's been with the city for 13 years. In the work that she's done, the lower level, newer staff knew the protocols. They testified that they knew the protocols. They testified also in that briefing that if they ever did not agree with the protocol that was given by a senior, they can still run it up the chain. So again, they can reach out to supervisors, they can reach out to Gina herself. So in your briefing that you have, that's also in there. It's important to note that the reason we are doing these VMR checks is it's not necessarily from a citation type of method. It is for a safety thing, right? We want to make sure the animal that potentially had killed an animal does not have rabies. So that's the importance behind the VMR. And so going back to the closing out of a call, we do have cases that are still open. These are cases that aren't closed out right away. So even if the question is, did he have enough time because he only had an hour and a half before the end of the shift, we could have left that open and we could have tackled it the next day or within the week. So I think that might answer some of the questions that y'all may have, but I can answer any other questions that y'all have.
Yes, do you really think a 3-day suspension is warranted in this case, considering what he was up against in the middle of the night?
Sure, it's a great question. So we go through the matrix, the city matrix.
You go ahead.
Okay, so we have gone down the matrix with the formal counseling. As he's been given multiple formal counselings for following protocols. And so this is that next step in that matrix. So going from a formal counseling to a 3-day suspension is why we're here.
So what you're saying is that previous actions that he has taken or not taken led to this?
Correct, yes.
Anybody else with a question? No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so at this moment, I guess we're to decide whether or not to accept the hearing officer's recommendation. Elsa?
I'd like to hear, I don't know who can speak on behalf of the senior level, that the he said, just the disconnect between what Mr. Dominguez is saying. Yeah.
In my report, I do point out that Mr. Dominguez admits the documentation was never discussed. He's being suspended, I mean, it's because of documentation, so Mr. Dominguez admits the documentation was never discussed, and the senior officer, the senior says, I never told him not to document. So even if he told him to close the case, that didn't mean you didn't document. And so the key is that VMR documentation that is the issue, that was not done in this. So, for example, on his written questions, they ask him, do you know that the protocol requires VMR checks, memo notes, and creation of animal profiles for animals encountered in the field? And Mr. Dominguez answered yes. So the issue of documentation, there's no dispute, because he says he never talked about it to his senior. And the senior said, no, I never told him not to document. So close or no close is a different situation than documentation, and that suspension was for the documentation.
Okay, now he's told us that the senior officer told him to close it.
The
Isn't
senior
that-
officer says, but I never told him not to document. That's a different thing, that he could have closed it, done the documentation, and then closed it.
So there's documentation either way,
Right.
always.
That's, yeah, I mean, because especially it was a bite case. They had been out there before, lots of problems, lots of dogs, lots of cats, but the difference is it was a bite, and that the supervisor, everybody says, that put it up to a different level, a safety level.
So what you're saying is that the senior officer told him, close it, you're saying he said, close it after you... You're saying he said to close it after he documents?
No, he said he never talked about documentation. And Mr. Dominguez says, I never brought up documentation. I brought up what to do, help, try to get these dogs, that kind of thing. But Mr. Dominguez in the hearing said, no, I never brought up, we didn't talk about documentation. So there was no dispute on that they never talked about it. So the assumption you could take the assumption from the senior officer, he didn't know he wasn't going to document. was okay to document and then close the case, or maybe not, but that was never, and again, it's preponderance. This isn't, like 90% proof. This is 51% who to believe, and so in the totality of circumstances, I felt they had made their 51%. Not 100% perfect. Not like a criminal case, so.
Thank you.
May I add one?
Yes, please.
bit of information on one of the issues that you all raised, which was the chain of command. And there was testimony in the hearing about the chain of command. That was an issue that came up. And hearing Officer Palafox, she talks about it in pages 9 and 10. She devotes a section to it of her recommendation. And she talks about how two of his witnesses that he chose, his colleagues, Mr. Brandon O'Connor and Gabrielle Alvarez, they both testified that there is a chain of command, but if you don't agree with what the senior is telling you, you can go to a supervisor. If what the senior is telling you isn't clear or you're not sure about that, you can go to a supervisor. There's different levels. You're not just stuck with that senior who happens to be on the shift with you. You can go to some of your other supervisory colleagues to get clarification, ask for help, to get some sense of guidance on a call if you genuinely have issues or questions here. I believe that was addressed in the testimony. Again, 14 pages, so there's a lot of stuff in there on a lot of different topics, but there was some discussion about that, so I just want to point that out. That again, we were there for a full day, even into the next day. We heard all of this same information, and so yeah, I'll leave it with that. But
Well, now that Mr. Marquez has addressed that issue, if you have any questions for him, feel free, just on that issue, and then you're gonna have to let Mr. Dominguez say if he has anything on that, and then maybe you wanna close it up at that point.
So a quick question. So it really doesn't matter if he was told to close it or not close it? The issue here is he failed to do documentation, right? That's
Yes.
where the decision's based on, failing to do documentation?
yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
And also, from what the interim director said, you've taken into consideration here past incidents with him, is that it?
Not necessarily, sir. I understand what Mr. Watsman was saying, but if you look at the matrix here that Ms. Palafox talks about this, for inefficient performance, the first offense on that level 2 is a presumptive penalty is 3-day suspension. He has had other formal counseling. We weren't making an issue of those. Some of those were years ago, different situations. But just based on the call that night, where it falls under a matrix for consistency across disciplines is the presumptive penalty for the first violation was a 3-day suspension. And that's what they went with. They could have tried to aggravate it to a 5-day or 10-day. They chose not to. They left it at 3-day. Another thing, just on that same note, because I think it's important, is Ms. Palafox makes it clear in her recommendation. Look, this is nothing to say negative about him as a person or his professionalism and his job for 9+ years, 13 years. It was just what happened that one day on that one call. And it was really that simple, and we can narrow it down to that.
We'd like to hear from Mr. Dominguez again, please.
Only on the issues that were addressed by Mr. Marquez, because Mr. Dominguez is entitled to speak on that if there's any final comments he has on that.
Yes, well, the reason why the documentation was not readily available for the report was based on the situation. The owner, Mr. Macias, was stressed about the situation. He's had previous encounters with our department, and that's why he was holding back information. So I asked what animals was I going to be documenting if I wasn't provided with that access to the property or any names or descriptions of the animals themselves. That's why that only one dog was documented. I cannot speculate. I can hear him. I was able to hear the other animals, but I cannot speculate on what's behind that door. I can only go based on what I see, and that's why it was documented that way.
If you could do this over again, what would you do differently?
I guess over or jump my senior officer and make him come out here through a supervisor. I was just trying to follow the chain of command as we're told. At this point, yes, I know that there's a lot of different opinions of what could have been done differently, but at the time of the inspection, I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration. I cannot lie.
Such as, go ahead, tell us what else.
think
Chair,
that-
that's beyond the scope of what's permitted at this stage. And then we would be reopening it up again for everybody. So, you know, my recommendation at this point is, you know, you can always talk to your hearing officer, because your hearing officer is an extension of you. You know, you've delegated the hearing authority to her. But at this time, you might want to just close it off for the witnesses, and you all discuss amongst yourselves, what are you going to do with your hearing officer's recommendation? You can sustain it, which means you approve it, you can modify it, or you can reject it. The only thing I will warn you about with rejecting completely means that you open the door to a de novo hearing yourselves, meaning the day and a half or the day and change that they had of hearings, you all would have to step in the shoes of. And that's why you have a hearing officer. Because if you don't have a hearing officer, then you are the ones that are hearing these cases and all the witnesses. So, you know, my recommendation is you are not to re-litigate the case, rehear it all over again, because your hearing officer has done that for you. So now you all just need to discuss and decide what you're going to do with her recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, if I just may add to Mr. Estrada's real quick, just because it has been a little while since we've done this and since we've kind of gone through this. As he was mentioning how Ms. Palafox steps into your shoes, remember, she's your fact finder on the initial step. And I bring it up only because there is a question of the who said, he said, she said. And so she determined by 51% her decision. Now, if you think the evidence that you see before you, she got it totally wrong, then you can make a determination. But remember, she's already made a determination. So you're reviewing her determination, not who you believe more.
Do you understand that, Mr. Dominguez?
Yes, I understand.
All right, so with that, unless you have anything else to say,
No, just thank you for hearing me out.
yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I guess we're open to someone making a motion.
Will you recognize me for a motion?
Yeah.
My motion is to sustain the recommendation for the 3-day suspension.
Okay. Seconded by Carlos Gonzalez. Motion made by Homero Lucero.
On that motion, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Well, before we do that, any discussion on the motion? Is there any discussion on the motion? I can add a comment that I think this motion has come up because the hearing officer has found that there's 1% against the well, 51%, but that means he's got 49%, so that means that's 1%, right? So that's the score. All right, okay, so with that, my comment, I guess it's time to call for the question.
The vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All
Any
opposed?
None.
Okay,
Motion passes unanimously to sustain the recommendation of the hearing officer.
so,
Thank you, Commissioners.
so I guess that brings us to the end of our session here tonight. Thank you all for coming. Wait a minute, we have a,
May I make a comment to
No.
Mr.?
Not on that matter.
No, not
No.
on that matter.
No, okay, if it's on something else,
His
yes.
concern about how employees are now represented by attorneys.
Sure.
Okay, this year I've done 6 cases, and in those 6 cases, 3 employees I recommended that 3 employees, that the discipline be, turned back, and then human resources settle with them. And then 3 for the employer. I've been very impressed with the way employees have represented themselves at the hearings. And many times I have to really, make sure they get their due process. But I would say I've been very impressed, and with Mr. Dominguez, I was very impressed at how they were able, not being attorneys, to do that. And I would also say that the attorneys for the city, the lawyers, have been they're not like court, right? They're very understanding that the employees are not attorneys. So I just wanted to say that because I've been very impressed with how they've been able to handle it, even though they're not attorneys or know the process. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so that wraps it up for this evening. And
Is there a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn, Carlos Gonzalez makes the motion to adjourn, seconded by Homero Lucero.
On that motion, call for the vote.
Okay, any discussion? Any discussion first? No
Any
discussion,
opposed?
then I'll call for the vote.
No?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night. This meeting closed.